what I never understood is that there was actually a lot of unsafety around men that I wasn't aware of. So it wasn't that I was in competition with them, but I felt a deep sense of distrust or uncomfortability. And I never actually acknowledged it or wasn't really aware of it. It was a complete blind spot. And at this event, there might have been 40 participants and nearly 50 guys on staff.
That's wild.
So it was just this huge group of men, and to feel the love and the connection and the safety and the trust in the group, I've never felt this before. Like, I've always been chasing the love from women and the feeling of love from a woman, but experiencing love from men is such a different experience. I've still yet to be able to describe it, other than it feels strong, it feels contained, and it feels good. And to be able to let that in and to trust just put me on a different trajectory.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. Linzey Beister is a somatic psychotherapist and mentor for men who supports men in mastering emotional intelligence so they can live a life of passion, presence, and play. He's also the co-founder of Embodied Union with his partner, supporting couples cultivate mastery in the areas of intimacy and relationships. Linzey and I initially connected through a mutual friend, and we immediately hit it off due to our shared passion for men's work and relationships. What stood out to me about Linzey isn't just his knowledge on these subjects, but the palpable sense that everything he discussed came from an embodiment of his own lived experiences. His initiation to manhood began early as he became a father at the ripe age of 21. Throughout this time, he's also been navigating the transformative fires of intimate relationship through his almost 20-year relationship with his ex-wife, which became a powerful access point of conversation in this interview. We also delved into his own journey of exploring polyamory for almost 5 years towards the end of their relationship, something I was eager to hear more about as it hasn't been a point of conversation on the show yet. And in this insider's look, I had the great opportunity to hear about the challenges, successes, and lessons that were learned along the way. Now, before we came together for our interview, I want to name that Linzey had offered me the chance to experience the Hakomi method, a psychosomatic modality in which he has been trained in for the past 5 years. And let me tell you, the experience I had with him was absolutely profound. I share about this in our interview together, where I recounted some of my own deep lessons around the importance of rest, receiving nourishment, and filling my own cup. This has truly been an incredible, enjoyable conversation, diving into the deep end of exploring subjects such as rites of passages, relationships, sexuality, men's development, and how we can step into deeper acceptance of who we really are. I can't wait for all you to drop into this powerful conversation with Linzey and I. All right, welcome back, everybody, to yet another episode at the Heart of Man. My name is Alex. I'm your host, and I'm incredibly excited to be inviting Linzey Beister to our podcast today. Linzey and I connected actually just a week ago, but it feels like there's already so much that has happened since. I heard about Linzey through a mutual friend, Scott Hamby, and heard incredible things. And then getting into conversations with you. You're a somatic psychotherapist and a men's mentor who really helps men as well in the realms of mastering emotional intelligence. And then as well, alongside with your partner, I know that you have an initiative called Embodied Union, where you really help individuals or couples, let's say, to cultivate deeper mastery in the realms of intimacy and relationships. So, Linzey, I welcome you to the podcast.
Thanks so much for being here. I love it. It's great.
So there's a lot for us to get into, a lot of pieces here where I see a lot of resonance, a lot of connection in the work that we do. But two pieces that I observed or noticed that you seem to be deeply passionate about are men's development and relationships. And just as an opportunity for our listeners to get to know you a little bit, I would like to hear, why are these two fields so important to you?
Yeah, I think it's always personal to start with, I guess. It's this, for me, I was a dad at 21, and that's kind of like what led me into like this realm of personal development, personal like awareness in a way. And it led me into just like wanting to learn more about myself and the dynamics between me and everyone else, and realizing that I'm the common denominator. So how do I operate in the world? How do I be a good father? How do I be a good partner? All those sorts of things. And it led me to just really like deep inquiry around like lots of different methodologies, I guess. And I ended up going and doing some workshops and that sort of thing. And then years later, I found myself in men's work. And it wasn't until I really got to that point that I would say, really felt the resonance or felt the depth of this kind of work. And it had me just realize that, oh, it's like a rites of passage, and working with rites of passage, and then just deepening all the way down, and all the while being in a really long-term relationship. I was in a relationship for 20 years. And so just in the fire of it, like in the fire and in the depths of relationship. And I think, this is where our stuff comes up. Like, if personal development is being in relationship all the time. It's constantly bringing up and extracting everything out of you in a good way if you're open to it.
Yeah, so much in what you said, and so many pieces that I would like to pull out of. But the first one that I'm kind of like drawn to speak to is rites of passages, because I hear you speak as well regularly about that, and this idea of like initiating men. And I know there was an experience for you, I believe, at 2018, where you got introduced to the Mankind Project, and you did the New Warrior training. I'm curious to hear, what was it about stepping into that training that was so impactful for you, and where were you at that time, and who were you when you came out of that experience?
Yeah, so prior to that, I was a professional Olympic weightlifting coach. I had my own gym and coached for Australia for a number of years, and I was actually coaching somebody that brought MKP to Australia. And that's how I got sort of indirectly involved. And a year prior, I also did some rites of passage facilitator training through a guy named Anna Rubenstein in Australia, Northern Rivers. So shout out to Anna and his work. And it was more just like, I was just struggling coaching boys 14 to 18. It felt like the hardest group to coach. It was like, what is happening here? What are these boys up to that are nearly men? And I was like, I need help here. I need to learn something here. And so starting that led me on this path to then going to the Mankind Project. And at the time, I just stopped my business of being a weightlifting coach. So I shut my gym, and big things happened in my relationship, which I'm sure we'll cover at some point. And I ended up, this part of it that I ended up, going to this rites of passage, this MKP event, and it cracked me. It absolutely cracked me. Like, what I never understood is that there was actually a lot of unsafety around men that I wasn't aware of. So it wasn't that I was in competition with them, but I felt like a deep sense of like maybe distrust or uncomfortability. And I never actually acknowledged it or wasn't really aware of it. It was a complete blind spot. And at this event, I think there might have been 40 participants and nearly 50 guys on staff.
That's wild.
So it was just this huge group of men. And to feel the love and the connection and the safety and the trust in the group, it was like, I've never felt this before. Like, I've always been chasing the love from women and the feeling of love from a woman, but experiencing love from men is such a different experience. Like, I've still yet to be able to describe it, other than it feels strong, it feels contained, and it feels good. And to be able to let that in and to trust just put me on a different trajectory. It just literally just pinned me into another realm of work.
I'm curious to hear, what do you believe made the experience or contact with men feel unsafe for you? Because this is something that I hear a lot from other men, and it's also my own experience. You know, my dad was primarily, absent, whether it was physically or emotionally. I was primarily raised by my mother. Growing up in school, a lot of my initial teachers were women. And so with that, I didn't have much of a strong male influence. And then I got bullied in school. And then it was like this whole distrust was created. And so I felt safer among women. And I would like push away men. And then I would also push away those masculine qualities inside myself. I became the classic nice guy. And so I'm saying that because I know a lot of men, that's as well their experience. And I'm wondering if there's something here that's alive for you, that could be supportive for the listeners.
Yeah, I think I didn't know it at the time, but I knew once I started to do men's work that some of my early childhood experiences led me to distrusting men. So there was a sexual assault in our family unit that I was aware of. And in that moment, because I was so young, it was kind of this part of me that was distrusting of men somehow. And also the situation that I was put in, it also made me sort of not really trust my caregiver at the time either, not consciously, but it was kind of this whole mistrust of everyone, everything. So I think that's why a lot of the times I'm pretty like self-reliant, and it kind of also created that, I think, for myself, that I need to figure it out myself so I feel safe. And so, yeah, it would play out. And I think similarly to me, single mom, growing up, probably, pushing men away, not wanting to seem like a perpetrator, not wanting to be too pushy around women. I wouldn't initiate, if I was attracted to a woman, I wouldn't initiate out of fear of like, oh, I'm going to be seen as creepy or bad or pervy or whatever it is. And it made me really passive as well. And having, I think, our mums sort of more in the feminist, first wave, second wave feminist movement, it's the same thing of like, we get taught how to treat a woman, but then when we do that, it doesn't necessarily equal love either, because it's not necessarily that healthy. So I was pretty stuck. I was pretty stuck in it, like having just female friends, not many guy friends growing up, same thing. And yeah, just the unconscious mistrust of men, I think, was the part. And what I realized is that it also made me mistrust the parts of me, especially the darker side of myself, or the darker masculine parts of myself, and that's been my work over the years, is like, how do I integrate that shadow? How do I integrate that part of me that could do really bad things, and I'm capable of it, but I don't do it, And I think that's something I think all men need to work on at some point in their life, is owning that part.
Yeah, there's a lot here, and as well, speaking to the dark masculine, I actually had an interview with Aaron Kleinerman, an American men's coach as well, and we went quite deeply into that quality of the dark masculine, which of course has its unhealthy expressions in the world, but there's also very healthy aspects of it, with the capacity to persevere, the capacity to go for what we want, the capacity to claim, the capacity as well sexually to ravish, but from a place of heart connection versus the disconnection. It's really about bringing that quality in relationship. So I'm curious to hear, when you did the new warrior training, how did things change for you? So I'm hearing that there was an experience for you where you could really open up to the trust of other men, and then you truly experienced, or let's say you were exposed to the nourishment of being in connection to other men. How has that then subsequently changed your relationship to other men, but also your relationship to, let's say, your inner man?
Yeah, it was just the best. It was like all of a sudden I had 4 billion other people I could be friends with, like it really did. It just opened up. Like, I had lots of male athletes that I coached and mentors, and I was in a, male dominated sport of Olympic weightlifting and CrossFit and all these things. And it was like, there was men around me everywhere, but all of a sudden after the training, it was weekly connection in men's group, and it was letting them in somehow, like actually getting them to see them in my vulnerability and vice versa. Became this just a layer deeper of connection that I'd never had before. And it also had me really be able to connect with my son more and also to my father more, because this work, as we know, it cracks parts of us open that weren't available before. So, you know, the ability to have close brothers, so to speak, and yeah, it had me really shift from having female friends and wanting to hang around women to really just wanting to hang out with guys, you know, because that actually fills my cup. That's actually the kind of connection that I actually desire. And maybe for me personally, it's because I've been in such long connection with females and growing up with them and having them as friends. It's like, I've kind of done that. The weekly men's group was just pivotal for me at the time, because when I shut my business, my relationship of 15 years also went from monogamy to polyamory in the space of 4 days of shutting my business to opening the marriage. And that was a big curveball, as well as then going and doing the warrior training. It was 2018 was a big year for me, a big year of change for me. And there was a lot of grief in that. There was a lot of transitioning and of letting go and of parts of me dying, you know, to the point where it was like, I nearly died, but just parts of me. So it was like this real transition, rites of passage, you know, complete tearing down of my identity and who I was as a international weightlifting coach to just someone, just a guy. Like that was probably one of the biggest pieces. It's like, if I'm not my career, then who am I? You know? And I think that was beautiful, because what we know of rites of passage work is you strip down your identity, you strip down nearly everything, so then you can come back a new version or a new way and a new way of being. And that was definitely alive for me.
So much in what you said, and just want to as well kind of, you know, bring that conversation around open relationships and put it on the shelf for now, but definitely want to come back to it later on. I want to help individuals who are listening in bring a deeper understanding of the value of initiations, the value of rites of passages. I feel like you're already touching on it, but at the same time, there's this, you know, inner part that's kind of like listening in, and they're like, this sounds fucking terrifying. I do not want to, you know, like let all these parts of me go. Why the fuck should I do this? All of that is like coming up for me right now. And if you can, I'm wondering if you could just speak to that around the value and the importance of having rites of passages, specifically into a more mature masculine way of operating.
Yeah, and I think that's accurate. Is well, you should be a little bit afraid and a little bit scared about like what's going to happen, because that's the whole point. It's the not knowing. It's the little bit of fear, as well as, can you be guided? Can you be received by elder men that are going to be taking you through this process, and know that you have trust in that because they've been there themselves. They've done it. It's embodied, you know? And I think that's the difference between parenting and then like the mentor. The mentor is this person that's really a guide, you know, and to be guided through a rites of passage. I mean, Western culture, we lack it, you know. In Australia, like I'm Australian, our version of rites of passage is drinking beer or getting your driver's license and turning 18. And most of us that are a bit older than that realize that we're still babies at 18, you know. And what I learned that was really powerful with MKP's work was that the man switch age is really 28 to 32. So we're at that stage in our life that we're transitioning from what we think we should do in our lives more to realize maybe this is not for me. Like, I've gone to school, I've gone to uni, I've got myself a trade, whatever it might be, and I've done it for a couple of years, and I've tried to get into a relationship, or I've ran a business and I've made money and I've done these things and I've traveled. Now what? You know, and I think for a lot of men, there's this sense of, well, if this is it, then what's all this for? Or what version of myself do I want to continue to be? And knowing what I know now, it's like, I don't think we actually become men until we're nearly 30 anyway. Like, I know the whole Saturn returns thing, like, I'm not really hugely into astrology or soul contracts or anything, but it's more just what I've witnessed over the years, and I'm 40 this year, is that 28 to 32 is so pivotal.
Fuck yeah.
So pivotal. And, you know, if men are feeling that call or feeling a bit lackluster in their life, it's not that anything is wrong. It's just there's the next level. You know, eagles do the same thing. Apparently, they rip their beaks off and pull all their feathers out and hide in a cave, grow it all back so they can live again their full lives. You know, and it's no different.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you said, and definitely can resonate with that very deeply, how pivotal this, you know, time frame between 28 and 32 is. And I mean, I'm 31 at the moment, so I'm still in it. I'm still going through it. But I recognize, you know, at 28, there was, you know, this relationship breakup that came, and this like real deep stripping down of my identity and everything that I believed, and like all the stuff that I've, you know, put on the shelf for my whole entire life. I couldn't ignore it anymore, because if I did ignore it, I knew that it would probably be the end of me. And so I had to really fully go in and really had to, let's say, dismantle the armor, dismantle the shells that I've created my entire life, and really build myself up from a deeper place of truth, a deeper place of authenticity, a deeper place of what's really here, what's real, and who am I really. So yeah, definitely recognizing the importance to this. I want to segue a little bit into relationships, because this is kind of like one of the areas where I commonly see as well a lot of men, specifically at that age, kind of receiving that call of, you know, stepping into a rites of passage or initiation. And, you know, considering as well that you're kind of in this unique frame, in the sense that you had a 20-year relationship, you explored monogamy, and then you explored polyamory for a while. So yeah, I want to just offer, first of all, just kind of like more of a broad question, and then I want to dial a little bit more into polyamory, considering that we haven't brought it into the podcast yet. But I would love to hear, what are some of the biggest lessons that you learned about relationships over the last, you know, 20 years?
Just that relationship is really where I've come to now, in the most simplest form, is relationship is about agreements. Simple as that. Just setting it up powerfully that you both have agreements about what you're both willing to meet, and just meeting those agreements as best as you can. If that's true for you, then obviously there's boundaries on top of that, and communication and intimacy and all those other things. And then my belief is then love sits on top of that. It's not that we're trying to base our relationship on love with each other, because love fluctuates, whereas agreements don't, you know? So that's probably been the biggest thing for me is, you know, when I first got into a really serious relationship at 17, it was kind of like I knew I was all in and I really wanted that relationship. And then at 21, we had our first son. And then at 22, we were married. And then it went from there. And I was doing all the things that I thought was right, you know, by societal standards. And wanting to do that and wanting to show up, wanting to be a good man, maybe similar to yourself, is that, you know, not having my dad largely in my life. Like I did have, you know, time with him, but it was like, I just really wanted to give a different experience to my partner and also to my son as well, as far as just being a good dad, you know, and that's probably the biggest thing in relationship for me.
I wonder here, you know, just this desire to, let's say, you know, be the good man, the good husband, the good partner. You know, I hear that desire in a lot of men, and, you know, it's a very virtuous one in many ways, but I do also see in many ways this is as well where a lot of men get stuck. And I'm curious to hear, why do you believe that is?
The stuckness to me is usually it's a lack of order in the relationship. So MKP has a really beautiful model of putting yourself first, your partner second, your family third, and your work fourth. And, you know, the stuckness for me where it wasn't working as I progressed in my relationship, what I realized was that there's typically a societal belief that we should be the protector and the provider. And granted, that's valid. But if we put our work before ourselves or before our relationship or before our family, it really hurts. Like, we can have a mismatch in our order, but over time it's detrimental. It's really detrimental. And it was for me. That was my experience.
What was so detrimental about, the lack of order, let's say?
I was putting my work first. I would work anywhere up to like 120 hours a week some weeks. And it would just be that that was where all my energy went. And then I would get home and I'd already have 100 conversations that day, my partner wanting quality time or wanting to converse. And I was just too exhausted, So it's like noticing those things of where I wasn't showing up and where I was trying to, provide and do that at the detriment of myself, and not knowing that myself at the time. It's like, and I think for a lot of men probably listening, it's like, we don't know what our edge is until we meet it, and sometimes it has dire consequences where could be the end of a relationship, or your business could go bust, or you could get fired, or whatever it might be, like whatever vices you might have might start to increase to the point where your work then decreases. So it's a fine balance. Yeah. And I think no one gets that right every time.
Yeah, I'd love to highlight just kind of the importance of coming into a recognition of our own needs, our own limitations, our own boundaries, our own desires and wants. And I think that's kind of like the shadow of the guy who's constantly trying to be good, because there is no focus towards what do I need, what's going on for me, and as well the willingness to communicate that. It's kind of like the attention's all out there, and the question is, okay, what is needed of me? What does my partner need of me? What does my family need of me? And all valid, all beautiful, but just over time creates a lot of detriment, in the sense that, as you said, I'm coming from an empty cup, and then my partner doesn't ultimately get all of me because I've already given it everywhere else, but I had no time nor space for myself. And I would say that's one of the biggest edges that I am as well currently working on, where I'm, really learning how to nourish myself, how to take care of myself. And that's as well one of the pieces that we dove in deeply in one session that we had, and the modality that you provide, Komi, which I definitely want to get a little bit more into. But for now, can we speak a little bit more about that edge of, for men, let's say, of taking care of themselves, of nourishment, of slowing down? I would love to hear your reflections on that, and what you have to say on that.
Yeah, I think learning how to put yourself first is a bit of a journey for all of us, because we're drinking out of a cup right now, and it's always that analogy of, can I teach men how to fill their cup and give from the overflow, rather than draining their cup to give to everyone else. It's like, it's a boundary for me now to give from my cup. I only really want to give from an overflowing cup. So I have to be really mindful about how I feel that, and making sure that I'm responsible for myself first and foremost, because I need to be able to have that energy to give. I want to show up. I want to lead men. I want to be a good therapist, all those things. So it's like, I have to be doing the practices myself. And I guess for me, it's like learning the tools of resourcing, which is what I'm always trying to teach men, is how to do mindfulness, how to resource the body, how to feel safe in the body such that nourishment can actually go in. Because I think for a lot of men, there's barriers to nourishment, especially, and barriers to rest. It's like, I can only be loved if I'm of value. I can only, and there's the whole talk around being a high valued man and all those things. And we want to have big, juicy bank accounts, and we want to have nice things and be able to provide a good relationship or a place for a partner and kids and all that sort of stuff. At some point, we also have to rest, and also have to fill our own cups and have spaciousness enough to be able to do so. So it's a balancing act, and it's a skill act as well. So teaching men resourcing skills, how to ground themselves, how to make themselves feel good. And it could be time in nature. It could be mindfulness practice. It could be taking some time off social media. It could be celibacy even, like to really build up the energy in the system. There's so many ways. I've got hundreds of resources that I give to men, and it really comes down to like what each man needs and what each man feels comfortable with, I guess. And again, safety.
Hey, it's Alex here. Before we dive back into a conversation, I'd like to share something that's very close to my heart, which is my one-to-one coaching. I've had the great privilege of working with individuals from diverse backgrounds, all seeking to deepen their connection with themselves, embody deeper confidence, thrive in their relationships. Through this work, I've had the great honor to support my clients through incredible transformations. Among other things, they gain deeper clarity, resilience, and strong connections, both personally and professionally. Here's what some of them had to say about our work.
I was able to fully reconnect with myself, which enabled me to fully reconnect with my partner. All of a sudden, I was having discussions that I had feared, that I had avoided for years. I started leaning into conflict. I felt more empowered.
And I was just blown away by how skilled he was as a guide, as a coach. He really met me where I was at.
Thank you, Alex, for this amazing time. You changed my life, and it's so crazy what's possible in such a short time.
Don't think twice. Sign up, take the leap to join him at any of his courses and programs. You will not be disappointed, and you will come out a new, incredible, evolved version of you, and it's going to be amazing.
I feel more confident, more grounded, and in control of my emotions.
If somebody is actually looking to join it, I would say it's a no-brainer.
It was just a beautiful and magical experience, and therefore I'm going to work with him in the future for sure. And when you seek change in your life, when you seek more happiness and freedom in your life, then you definitely should start with Alex.
As you can see, people from all corners of the world have experienced profound changes. And while I'm constantly evolving in my work, my one-to-one coaching remains my favorite offer. The intimacy, dedication, and transformation that's present within this container is undeniable. At the time of releasing this episode, I have just 2 slots available for my one-to-one coaching. If you feel called to take the next step, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find a link to my website, shoot me an email, or DM me on Instagram, and you'll find all the details in the show notes below. Now, a quick disclaimer. Availability might have changed by the time you hear this, but my encouragement is to not let it hold you back. Reach out, and I'd be glad to explore how I can support you on your journey. Without further ado, let's get back to our conversation. This is one of the biggest edges that I see among so many men that I speak to. It's just this lack of nourishment, this lack of, tending to ourselves and constantly having our attention towards, what can I give to others? And in that one-time session that we had, and as mentioned, I want to get a little bit more into Hakomi a bit later, but the thing that really stood out for me was, there were so many different aspects and layers and pieces that we addressed in that one-time session. It was absolutely incredible. And the thing that really stood out for me was that moment where, we worked on a lot of different internal pieces, but there was an aspect where the way I would frame it right now is I was in a position where I was holding this whole cup by myself, and no one could help me with it. No one could support me. And there was such a deep resistance towards ultimately receiving support. And I remember there was this moment where you guided me towards taking a cup and ultimately bringing all my attention, all my energy towards everything that I was holding, and really infusing that cup with, all the demand, all the burden that I was experiencing. And there was a moment where you took it away from me. And that was my invitation ultimately to step into rest, to step into nourishment. And the more I was doing it, I ended up starting to sob, and just deeply cry, because it felt so vulnerable, but it felt as well so scary to receive that, because my whole life has pretty much taught me that I need to be self-reliant. I need to be self-sufficient. And this is as well the way where I can ascertain control and a sense of understanding of how to move through my life. However, if I truly allowed myself to receive support from another, if I truly allowed myself to rest, it would require me to let go, and it was deeply vulnerable for me to go into that, but it was also deeply, deeply healing at the same time. And I'm already noticing a few shifts here and there where I'm operating. So it was profound for me. It was fascinating. I said a lot here, so in case there's anything that you would love to comment on,
I think just, again, it probably sounds like if men are listening to this, it's like, it's very hard to ascertain or to understand until you've had the experience. Yes. But again, it's just really making sure that there's a chance for you to let what is happening in, and letting the guard down somehow, and having those blind spots, which we all do as men, is like, how am I actually letting this in? Like, if I'm in relationship right now, am I actually letting my partner's love in? Or is she having to give me lots of love, but I'm only receiving a tiny portion of that love? It's like, I wouldn't like to think that that's what I'm doing, but yet if I have all these protective mechanisms in place and I'm also in relationship, all the ways she tries to bid for connection or love and to support me, and I'm kind of resisting that, I actually make myself very hard to love, and so that can be very hard in the long run for her, and it will actually have her step away or step back as well. So it's noticing that.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So I would like to go a little bit more into the conversation around open relating, and I would like to hear, so for anyone who is not familiar with the conversation, who is not aware of this, I'm curious to hear, so what happened? From what I understand, it was the 14, 15-year mark that kind of led to you guys wanting to explore this, and what are some of the lessons that you guys got out of it, and how was it supportive in your growth journey?
It was hugely supportive for my growth, because like anything, you don't really know until you've tried it or done it. And I know that there's probably a lot of resistance to open relating from people. It's not normal, but it's not Disney, because this is what we kind of get brought up on. I know it was for me, brought up on Disney and movies and TV shows about love, and it's like finding the one and having those sorts of connections. And open relating is more about letting, love is infinite. Love is all around us. So it's having that experience. One of the simplest ways is people go, well, you can't love more than one person. And it's like, what about your mum and dad? Does loving your mum make you love your dad less? It doesn't really work like that. So it definitely breaks down our beliefs around love and relationship and what is possible. It also highlighted for me my understanding of the progression of relationship that was unconscious. It was almost like my relationship default setting. I was never really aware that it was on a default setting. I was like, oh, I thought monogamy was just the way. And it's like, it's not the only way. It was just the only way that I knew.
What do you mean when you say default setting?
Well, in Western culture, it's you find the one, and then from there you get together, and then you progress along and get married and have kids and get a house and all that sort of stuff. And really, it's like, it doesn't have to be like that. Relationships can be platonic, or relationships can hold very different meanings and values. So when it comes to open relating, it's having the opportunity to explore what is there without necessarily the having to take it all the way to we live together and we're going to grow old together. It could be that we spend a week together, exploring something or whatever it might be. So it can vary is what I mean by it. And there's different versions of polyamory and open relating. Like there's hierarchical non-monogamy, where you have a primary partner and then secondary partners and whatnot. Or it can be, relationship anarchy, where there's no rules. I haven't done that. I wouldn't recommend it. But I think it's just coming from a place of being open to what is possible, and in my case, I've had the lived experience, and I got to the point for myself where I was feeling like there was other things in my life that I wanted that was beyond relationship only. Because if you're open relating and trying to do a good job, it's a lot of work. Is my experience of it. Wouldn't say that's for everyone, but it was a lot for me. And I really wanted to focus more on my studies, my career, trying to be a good dad, all those sorts of things.
Yep.
And so,
okay, so the thing I'm hearing is that, first of all, the advantage or benefit is that it allows us to really question some of the, I'm going to say, ways of operating, especially in intimate relationship, that we're just naturally indoctrinated into. And it really allows us to have an honest and open look at, how do I really want to relate? You know, am I, let's say, suppressing or not acknowledging particular desires or ways of expressing myself in a relationship that, let's say, are not available in monogamous relating? Do I want to explore and maybe challenge some of those ways that I've been taught into? So I see definitely that. There's definitely, I'm going to say, probably the edge of having someone, you know, you love so dearly that you spend many years with, let's say, and really just the thought of, I'm going to say, them connecting with other individuals. I mean, just the idea of it definitely feels heartbreaking for me.
it was very difficult. What I learned about that is jealousy shows you where you're not. So it instills a sense of, you have a desire to be or have the quality of the other person that your partner maybe sees in that person. So I think jealousy is a fuel source to just self-improvement, you know, in a big way, or a self-acceptance about, like, it really shows you who you are. And the same with open relating. It gives you a sense of, like, well, how secure am I? Or how anxious am I? Or how avoidant am I when it comes to attachment? It really gives a sense of, like, okay, what am I currently dealing with here? Because they might do something, and as long as it's in agreement, like I was talking about before, and then it's then on me to meet that, you know, to hold myself and not make it my partner's fault or my partner's whatever. Because I think this is what we do so easily, is we blame our partner for making us feel a certain way, and no one else can make us feel a certain way. That's on us, you know. So it can feel very painful at the time, and it's also very insightful. And for some, I wouldn't recommend. And where I'm at with it nowadays is that I'm very happily in a monogamous container and would like to keep it that way. It just showed me, like, what is possible, what can happen.
Yeah, it definitely, I mean, the thing that clearly stands out for me is that it brings a magnifying glass towards all one's patterns, insecurities, you know, the edges that otherwise would not come up. How did you start learning to deal with those edges? So, you know, because from my understanding with that partner, you were doing open relating for a while, right?
Yeah, nearly 5 years.
Yeah.
And so having support, so obviously having men's group was really beneficial for that, for the growth, for where I was falling down or not meeting agreements or being triggered, and having support outside of the relationship. I think for so many of us is we don't have support outside of our relationship. Like, our partner is our only person that we really talk to about deep, vulnerable things. So if we don't have brothers to share that with, we burden our relationship with it. And nothing's more burdensome than bringing your trigger about your partner to your partner. Like, I think there is merit in talking it out with a brother that's holding space for you in a powerful way, where he doesn't let you just blame or be in victim, but it's like, how can we own this situation such that when we go back to our relationship or talk to our partner, it's from a more grounded, more present place, and less blame or less dysregulation in it. So, yeah.
Yeah. One of the, a teacher that I was very inspired by for a number of years, his name is Brian Reeves. And he speaks about this idea that a lot of couples are ultimately in a two-person village, and that they're trying to do everything, you know, just with each other. And there's ultimately incredibly strong limitations just to that. And I guess I just want to highlight the importance of having community, having the importance of support, and really having individuals where we can bring our stuff to, so our relationship doesn't have to hold everything. I'm wondering, with the couples that you work with, the men that you now as well speak to within relationships, what are some of the main challenges that you see?
Yeah, I think it ties into this. If I'm just going to finish off the open relating, is that it's a way to explore, you know, sexuality as well. And I think for a lot of people, especially in our case, we were together from a young age, is not having that time to explore, you know, by being just monogamous. Like you said, it's a two-person village from 17 to 37. It's like there was a desire to explore. I think that was it from my partner at the time's desire.
What do you believe happens when we don't acknowledge that desire, when we don't allow it, let's say?
Comes out sideways. Comes out in cheating, comes out in like being sneaky, it comes out in pornography, it comes out in all sorts of ways, I think, for men and for women. And so it's acknowledging the desire, acknowledging that. And that's the same thing I was talking about before with the man switch age. It's if men haven't done enough drinking, drugging and rooting, which is DDR, which is what they talk about in MKP, that's why midlife crisis happens. A man gets to 40 and hasn't been through that 28 to 32 switch, has been pushing himself for way too long, ends up wanting to go out and splurge and buy a car or cheat on his partner or whatever it might be. He might need to acknowledge that he hasn't had the experiences that he wanted or wants, you know. And the same, I can't deny that of some people in their life, that they really want to explore something there. And there's a lot of growth in eroticism and in our erotic nature that gets suppressed in our society because it's a part of us. We're sexual beings, you know? So it's like acknowledging that as well. And you can totally do it in a monogamous container. That's fine. So that's why I'm not an advocate for open relating, and I'm not going to hate on it either, because for some people it's beautiful and they can make it work. It's just who you're going to do it with. You know?
Yeah, I love what you're speaking to, and as well, just that importance as well of really owning our sexual desires. And I personally have never explored open relating, and personally as well I'm not as well feeling the inclination towards it. However, I do recognize absolutely the importance of like really allowing those very primal desires to be seen, to be witnessed, and as well finding vehicles through which we can express those. And, you know, as well being a sexual being, like I recognize and like I really have to honor that part of me and find ways to really, I'm going to say, wield that part of me so it doesn't go sideways. Coming back to some of the challenges that you see among men in relationships, what do you see?
The biggest one that I see is not having the communication skills. Primarily, it's the lack of self-awareness that men have, because for a lot, they're not really diving deep into themselves. So there's a part of them that's not really curating their own sensitivity and understanding internally. So they're viewing everything outside of themselves, as in what's going wrong in their life or in their relationship is their partner or some external thing. They're not taking ownership. Some version of communication, self-regulation, and then ability to communicate is usually pretty low because emotional intelligence is quite stunted. And then I would also say skill in the bedroom, because going back to the point of open relating is women typically are more inclined to be open relating or wanting experience, whereas guys, we can kind of eat meat and veg our whole lives, you know, and women want a bit more flavor. So it's acknowledging that as well, because typically people think that men are the ones that want to open relate or have multiple partners. It's actually women's capacity and appetite for sexual experience is actually higher. That's why smutty books are read by women. They want to be lit up in all the ways, not just in their bodies, you know? So it's, can you meet your partner's need and wants and desires in the bedroom as well, and having that as a skill.
Okay, considering that you've opened up this topic, we have to go into it because I know all the listeners are like, I want to know more about this. So what does it really require in order to, let's say, be more proficient in the bedroom?
Well, there's lots of maps with this. So straight away, it's, you know, knowing what your love languages are, knowing what your erotic blueprints are, having the understanding around masculine and feminine dynamics. So, you know, you could talk about polarity. There's many great coaches that talk on polarity. So I'll leave that one. But it's also, I think, really important to just have your own self-pleasure practice and cultivating that for yourself as well, especially around sensitivity versus sensation. That was one of the big ones that I've learned in the last couple of years, or has really grounded me, is Diana Richardson's work. And she goes into it quite a bit for men and for women, and obviously for couples. It's having this ability to be able to create sensitivity in oneself. And again, ties back into this nourishment, ties back into rest. It's like, I can actually receive less now sexually, but be more nourished by it. So I think for a lot of men, it's this want, need. And when they get it, they're getting appeased, but they're not being pleased. So when my partner appeases me, it never feels as good as when she's pleasing me. And so allowing that in and getting the nourishment there has just radically changed intimacy for me. So there's a lot to learn, you know. Relationship and intimacy is definitely skill.
Yeah.
And most of us, men, haven't been to a workshop, haven't done anything around sex. We base our experience off our partners that we've had and the porn or the magazines that we've watched. And, you know, we know how that goes.
Yeah.
It's not good. It's not good.
I love what you shared, and it's fascinating to me considering that we don't know each other. We met each other a week ago, but just the parallels that you kind of spoke into around, what is truly supportive in order to, let's say, support a man, or maybe even as well just couples, to be more better in the bedroom, to have an enhanced sexual experience. Certain maps like the love languages, the erotic blueprint, definitely received a lot of value in that in my own relationships, and just the understanding how we speak different languages, and as well really learning how to speak the language of our partners and not necessarily project our own language constantly to the other individual. So I won't go so deep into it right now, but my high encouragement to anyone listening in is to really go into that. And then, of course, learning about polarity dynamics, and that's something I personally went really deep into. And then as well, the tantric work, and learning as well to self-source our own sexuality, right? And not constantly needing it from someone outside of ourselves, because that really allows us to, first of all, empower ourselves, but at the same time makes us as well less needy, which doesn't bring up as well all the kind of like avoidance, anxious mechanisms that, are so regular, let's say, in a relationship.
Yeah. I mean, that was, for me, that was one of the biggest breakthroughs, was having a period of celibacy, and like...
How long did you do that for?
3 months.
Okay.
In my relationship, my long relationship. And there was a fear for me initially, because we were open relating. It's like, well, if I'm not pleasing my partner, she'll go elsewhere. So there was all this fear around this.
Yeah.
So there was a desire for me to do this, but there was also some fear. And then what I also got, coming from an essence like strength conditioning background, was it's exactly like fasting. It's once you're over the initial meal mist that you've had and the hunger pain subsides, so much great things happen. Clarity happens, body regeneration. So the same thing when it comes to a sexual fast or an orgasm fast, it's okay, I've got blue balls for a while, and then it dissipates, and then it goes into, I feel way more sensitive. I feel like I'm more grounded. I feel like I could need less sleep. I have more energy. I have more clarity. I'm starting to notice all these things happening. And then it got to the point of like, oh, it really showed me what my relationship was to love and to relationship. It's a great teacher, because it was like, okay, I can't get, a lot of men try and get love through sex, right? And it's a general, but it was, and whereas women use sex for connection because they want to feel connected to, and the guys want to have sex to feel connected. So there's this opposite dance that's playing out. And so for me, having this experience of like, oh, I can actually be in relationship and in love with my partner without it, then it started to create like the non-neediness. And for me, what I really landed on was that I never engage with my partner if I'm horny. Never. It's like going to the supermarket when you're starving, hungry, and doing the groceries. It's never good. You know, you do things and buy things that you would never should eat. And the same thing, if I'm coming from a needy place with my partner, she's going to feel it a mile away. There is no way. And it's not to say I don't have those feelings, but it's I'm in a more grounded, regulated place in my body, and then I have better awareness and attention of myself that I can then feel her through me, rather than playing out my desire or not being present and all those things because I just want. It's like women can feel that a mile away. No wonder they say no to sex. It's like, I didn't even ask for it. Like, asking a woman for sex is such a masculine thing to do, and it's so direct that it barely works. Again, if you do get a yes from her, it's going to be appeasing, not pleasing. So it's like, I don't even do that either. It's reading the room right and cultivating intimacy 24/7, because sex is happening in your relationship 24/7. And I think guys need to hear that more often, is that you can be cultivating this essence and this connection with your partner all the time, all the time.
Dude, I feel like we could like have like a whole masterclass around sexuality, and a part of me wants to like go in there, to be honest with you, but there's so much for us to kind of like as well address. But man, that's a really powerful reframe as I see it for a lot of men, because I mean, how many of us, you know, come from this position of wanting to initiate, wanting to engage in sex when we do feel that horniness, and as well how that really, let's say, pushes away our partners. I've definitely done it in the past as well. And just that reframe as well, that sex is happening all the fucking time. And it's really about cultivating an environment for that, continuously. I recall one of my friends, Carolina, who's also here in Bali. She's a relationship coach, and she kind of had this phrase, sex starts with the morning coffee.
Yes.
And so I kind of really like that, you know, just this idea of like, oh, okay, like how do we move from the moment that we wake up, right? You know, like just maybe holding each other more tightly, or, you know, touching each other sensually, but not necessarily having an outcome or an agenda, you know, maybe as well addressing verbally how attracted we are to our partners or how sexy they look today, but not necessarily needing anything from that in that moment. Passionately kissing our partner before we head out for the workday. I mean, it can be like simple things like that, you know?
Absolutely. It's like, it gets to be fun. It gets to be something that you play in, that you dance in, that has her wanting to close the gap.
Yep.
Like that's always the part for me in relationship is, I know I'm winning in relationship when it's my woman is wanting to close the gap, you know, versus me trying to close it. It's like a lot of guys think, oh, I need to initiate. It's like, if you can create enough desire and anticipation in your partner, she'll close that gap, you know? And it's like, that gets to be the fun dance, you know?
And there's so much for us to get into. Okay.
And that's a skill. Like, that is not easy. I'm not saying that's just like, you should be able to do that straight away. And it takes two to dance.
Yes.
Right. So it's like really encouraging your partner to have her own self-pleasure practice and her own embodiment. And my thing that I'm always trying to help men is like, glow her up. If you're in a relationship with a woman, then how can you be nourishing her such that she is well resourced and well like looked after and tended to emotionally, spiritually, physically, all those things, because that then she has a surplus to give as well. So it's like, you know, having a partner that's glowing, that's radiant, that's well fucked, all those things, it's like, that's a flex in relationship. you know, it's like, how can you be, you know, building her up as well?
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. And I can see that you have a lot of passion for this conversation around relationships.
Yeah.
All right, let's go a little bit deeper into men's development. And one of the things that you kind of spoke into is that you like to give maps for men. You like to give them an understanding of how to wield and operate their internal landscape. I wanna go a little bit into archetypal work with you, because I know that you're really passionate about it. I know it's really valuable for a lot of men. We haven't gone into archetypal work yet on this podcast, and so I want to hear a little bit more about that. Why do you believe, first of all, what are archetypes? Why is that valuable for men, and why do a lot of men respond to that?
Yeah, I was introduced to mature masculine archetypes through the Mankind Project, and it started from just calling in the directions, the north, the south, the east, and the west. It was just around nature, really, like above and below and internally. And so once I started to see that for myself and started to use more grounding techniques and creating a bit of a daily ritual, it started to become more apparent, this king, warrior, lover, magician that gets used quite a bit, Jungian archetypes and mature masculine archetypes. And it was just a really cool map for me. Like, for me, coming from a S&C background, it's like having a training program or something to follow feels really good. And so when it comes to this internal world that we all have, it's like, how do I go in there? Where am I going? It just feels like a huge void. And I think for a lot of men getting into this work, it seems a bit daunting or a bit like not obvious, because there's no actual like, this is how. And I don't think there's one way to do it, but I definitely think there's a lot of great maps and resources to utilize. So the mature masculine archetypes is the way that I like to use them is each of them has a direction. Each of them has like a primary function and a key emotion. And this really helps, I believe, men for their emotional intelligence or awareness to start with. So the king is the seer, the king is the visionary, and the key emotion of the king is joy and guilt. So he has two, but it's mainly joy. The warrior is the action taker, the doer, and his anger is his main thing. So it's like he holds that like fierceness in us all. And then the magician is fear is the emotion. His is transformation and connection, transformation is the main one. And the lover archetype is grief, because to know love is to grieve it, to lose it. And his is the feeler. And with the lover archetype, it's also our artistic connection and connection to ourselves as well. So when we're first born, our lover archetype is the first one, because it's all about connection. It's all about the present moment, being in our body, being in the playfulness and getting to have fun. Magician's next. Magician gets developed through fear. Something happens in our lives that creates fear for us. And then we have to be a different way and have strategy, which is what our mind does very well. Then eventually we move into the warrior, our anger, our boundaries, who we are as a man, those sorts of things, wanting to do, wanting to create, and also wanting to separate and cut from our emotions and cut from our family to go out into the world and be who we are and claim ourselves. And it's not until we integrate these first three archetypes that we get to develop into the sovereign, into the king. So the king's last. And again, maybe it takes us till we're 40, 50, 60 to get to that king position in ourselves and really feel our joy and see the gold in ourselves and have a vision for who we are and what we want in our lives. So that is like a very quick, piece on archetypes.
Yeah, you did that beautifully, and I loved the way you summed it up. And I think the thing that I love about archetypes and just any form of parts work with this recognition that we don't just, we're not just one aspect, but we have numerous different expressions, numerous different ways of operating. Like in some ways I can be very fiery, I can be intense, I can be ambitious, I can like fucking go for it. In other ways I'm more shy, I'm more reserved, I'm a bit more passive even. And so we have all these different expressions, and in a lot of ways these are in some ways conflicted with each other, and they're not talking with each other. And so when we have some form of language when we have some form of context of these different aspects of ourselves and how they're communicating with each other, what they're doing, we can then start to learn how to communicate better with them, learn to tend to any needs that may be there. And so when we do that, we don't necessarily have to come more from that place of suppression and then fucking willpower through it, but it's actually more about, okay, you know, this part of me is acting up. What does that part of me really need right now? Because as soon as we provide that sense of safety, resistance leaves us, usually, like from my experience. And that's really the thing that I'm just so passionate about. A lot here, what I said, it seems to have resonated. So
yeah,
feel free to comment.
This part is, and it's not that we're trying to be a certain archetype. It's that we're actually just wanting to be in the center of those four. Yep. You know, that's the axis mundi. That's the work of like being a centered, grounded, embodied man is like, how do I, when it's needed of me, can my warrior show up? If I've integrated it and I have awareness around him and around my anger, it's like, oh, he's needed. I'm feeling angry. Oh, cool. What's that about? It's like, oh, it probably needs a boundary. It's probably telling me something that's happening in my life right now that I need to address. Okay, can I call upon that energy? Can I use that and then come back to my center? And it's like, oh, I'm in fear and I'm not taking action. What do I need to transform? What needs to change here such that I can go into that more and not reject it, but it's like owning it. And that's the part for me with the archetypes. It's how do I help support men with their emotional intelligence? By giving them archetypes and giving them characters of themselves to connect with. It's less about I'm just a bad person or I can't do it or I don't know or I am just the way I am, which is not the truth either. You're just the version of yourself now from all the past experiences that you've had to get to this point to survive. Let's utilize it. Let's build on this. Let's become better communicators, more embodied, and have more range. Like it gets to be fun, you know, like taking that warrior energy to your relationship can be so good because that's more of like the dark masculine, the more drive, the more like fierceness. Women love that because that puts them more into their softness, into more of their feminine. So it's like, can you play in that? If you're always the nice guy or you're always sitting in your mind, that can lead to dysfunction in your life. So it's like, how do I help men come back to their center, their goal, their middle? Yeah. And then lots of maps from there as well. But that's a great starting.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I want to address it, because it's such a simple but also very encompassing map. Of course, there's, you know, more layers and pieces to this, and there isn't just 4 archetypes, but it's a very great map for a man to start with and to really start learning about his internal landscape. And you kind of communicated as well this sense of that certain individuals may be overexpressed in one and then underexpressed in another, right? So the nice guy completes, let's say, more overexpressed in the lover archetype, but then has no kind of warrior energy inside of him. And then there's others who are, let's say, more in the, you know, very like generalistic, simplistic, like in the stoic frame, like all warrior, but like there's no lover connection here. And so where do you see kind of the biggest edges for the men that you work with?
I think what I've seen so far is a lot of the guys that enter into men's work already come from a place of magician and lover already, some degree. And the warriors are like, that's not for me. I'm detached from that. I'm just working and providing and doing that. I'm not interested in going into my feelings or into this realm. But then yet their relationship might break down, or they'll get injured, or they'll have something not work at work anymore, and then they have to do it. It becomes urgent. They're probably the edges. The edges is the wildness of the warrior archetype is probably not fully integrated. The feminine aspects and the real creative vulnerability of the lover isn't there. The cynicism of the magician and just the cynical nature as a protective source, because for so many men, it's give me the science, give me the data, give me the non-feeling, intellectualize instead of just like dropping the mask, because the magician's also really tied in with the ego and the safety officer as well to keep us safe. And I think for men is like, men don't acknowledge or don't see how they're playing out non-safety in their lives, because most of us feel fine, we're good, we're okay, but there's so much unsafety in our psyche, in our being, that we can't see, and that plays out. And if we can help men with that, transforms their life, because that is the part of transformation, is the magician. And the sovereign is like really having a vision for your life. A lot of men's like, I don't know what I want to do. Really, I can't see a clear vision of myself. And it's because these other parts aren't integrated. So a lot of guys are like trying to be kings, but they haven't integrated the other three archetypes that are absolutely necessary to be the king. You can't be the king if you haven't integrated all these other parts. It doesn't work.
Yeah, beautifully put. And I was smiling as I was listening to you, because I could see those are all the aspects that I've really had to work on. And for anyone who's listening in, you know, this is kind of like a more mythopoetic way of doing men's development. So 2 resources that I would love for you guys to check out are King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette, and then Iron John by Robert Bly. I think those are some really good ones that are a must, as I see it, for a lot of men. All right, let's pivot here a little bit, and I would love for you to have an opportunity to speak about Hakomi. I did a 1 session with you, and it was profound. It was incredible. What drew you to this modality, and what is it?
Yeah, so coming from a men's work space, it can be quite confronting and quite intense, and men's work can be as well very intense, confronting at times, those sorts of things. And I wondered sometimes if there was more of a finesse that I could be bringing to men's work. And it was a bit the same, like coming from an Olympic weightlifting background, most people think when you snatch and clean and jerk, it's all just brute strength. But it actually heavily involves technique and flexibility. So weightlifters are the second most flexible athletes on the planet behind gymnasts. So when thinking about it in this way, it was like, how can I bring more flexibility or finesse to men's work? I had an experience of going and seeing a Hakomi therapist for a session, and I just had the most profound experience. It was like this person was holding space for me in a way that I just couldn't describe, and it felt like I was in an egg yolk. It was like I was floating in an egg yolk. That's how like gooey and just yum it felt. And I was like, I want to be able to hold space like that, because it feels like Jedi level skills of holding space. And once I had that experience, I was like, I'm going to go and study this. I want to bring this to men and men's work. And that was years ago now. It was like 4 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. And I've been studying ever since. So Hakomi was developed by a guy named Ron Kurtz. I think it was Canadian based, but I think it was maybe American as well. Don't quote me on that. And he developed it in the 70s, I think it was, and even went as far as to doing work with Richard Schwartz that developed IFS. So those guys collaborated together as well. So Hakomi is a somatic psychotherapy, so a body-centered psychotherapy. And I know somatic work is becoming really popular these days and being thrown around, which I think is great. But it's just, for me, this work is super subtle, energetic, working with the subconscious mind. Because I realized this the other day. It's like, if you do somatic work, but do it in a conscious way, that's only 10%. You know, the conscious mind is only 10%. So 90% is unconscious, subconscious work. And so by doing Hakomi, I'm able to access all these unknown realms. And what I love about it is it's mindfulness like a meditation, but it's assisted self-study. So we are in a unit together while we're journeying into you and how you're put together, so to speak. And usually if we do that ourselves in meditation, we kind of go where we know. So it's quite easy to just move past something because we think we've identified it or seen it. But when someone is holding loving presence, like myself holding it with you, we're able to explore it in a different way or hold it where we would normally move. And to me, I know this is an esoteric conversation, but it just allows for spontaneity to happen. It allows for newness to come in where you are able to see things that maybe you weren't able to see before. And it's not me telling you. This is the part that really gets me, is I don't want to be coaching people and telling them what to do, because I'm not a coach. It's when we're a therapist or we're in this loving presence, it's you are actually leading it. And I'm guiding you and leading you to yourself. So it's like you have the wisdom, and my clients all have the wisdom of their essential selves, but how do we get to that? Or how do we get back there? You know, knowing that we are fully whole and complete within ourselves, and just all I want to do is just guide men home to themselves.
Yeah. Oh man, so much in what you said. And yeah, I just want to speak to, again, the session that we had and how as well profound it was for me, in the sense that the thing that we would consistently focus on was what was occurring in me somatically in my body as we were, you know, starting to, you know, touch on the subject matter that we were addressing. And it was fascinating how you were constantly observing any subtle movements, any subtle shifts, any, you know, posturing that would change, and you would bring my awareness to it. And then sometimes there's maybe a particular reflex or a movement that wanted to come through, and there was this invitation of, oh, why don't you explore that a little bit, you know? And it was like fascinating, and to what places it brought me. And I really admire the as well subtlety of it, because I see that a lot of these somatic practices can be quite intense, overwhelming, like, you know, blowing someone out of their window. And that's where a lot of the people who are, let's say, practicing or experiencing it, they're kind of like, oh yeah, that's where the good experience is, which can be true. But there is also, I'm going to say, a lot to say within the subtleties. And I would say that's as well the place from which we can cultivate a lot more agency and a lot more sovereignty. Because if we're always going into the big experience, we'll miss a lot of the subtleties that are happening underneath the surface. Like I remember, you know, that experience where I was like in freeze, and usually I would dissociate when I'm in freeze, in a freeze position. And it was beautiful for me to be like 100% present, 100% aware of it, and noticing that tendency to want to like, oh, I want to check out now, but actually just be with it and actually feel a sense of safety with it. I said a lot here, so in case you want to comment on something.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, like you said, like staying with the freeze. It's like, oh, I can even explore feeling frozen. You know, like we would not normally do that. We would just jump out of it or go somewhere else. And I think the beauty of Hakomi is it's not, because like you're saying with somatic work a lot of the time, or what's popular now is raising the noise, or like raising the volume of it. And I think when you keep doing that, you keep having to go for these big experiences. You're trying to find a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one. And that to me is such a masculine way of thinking about it, because it's no different from this sensitivity versus sensation. It's like, oh, I need to have more and more a higher peak. I need 1 woman, 2 women, 3 women, and it needs to be tighter, faster, more friction, more intensity, and eventually we get numb. And it's no different from this type of somatic work. It's like, how about I create more sensitivity? So Hakomi is about lowering the noise to let the signal come through rather than raising the signal up. And I think that's like, I think you're on point with that. Like just your experience of it and what you've said so far, it's like, that's the testament to it.
Yeah, what I really admired, you know, it was kind of like we were working with a lot of pieces that I was already familiar with, and I already had some form of like connection or relationship with. But then, you know, it was kind of like we did enter that space of newness and novelty, and it was for me that place of like really allowing nourishment in and really allowing myself to rest. And that's really when something new opened up in me, and really like stepped into like deeper grief and just letting go and like just releasing whatever was there. And yeah, it was a beautiful experience, my friend.
Yeah. Well, I think the piece in this that I want to speak into is just that we're not robots. You don't fix a human. So this whole idea of like, I need to fix myself, I'm somehow broken or I'm somehow faulty. It's like you fix a fridge. Humans are organisms and we heal. So it's like a tree, when it breaks, it heals. You don't fix it, you know, and the same for us. It's not about fixing ourselves. It's about coming home to ourselves, about healing the parts of ourselves that need acknowledgement or need nourishment or need to know that it wasn't okay, whatever happened to you or whatever it might be. And it's in that curiosity and in that place that we're coming home to ourselves. And really it's around self-acceptance, you know, and this journey for each of us is different, and it's beautiful. I'm just glad we're on it.
Okay, man. Yeah, I love that. And we're going to be slowly starting to wind down with the conversation. I'm wondering if there's any last pieces that you would like to speak into about Comey before we kind of come into wrapping this conversation up.
Just that I'm super grateful to have found men's work and be on this journey, and now moving more into a therapist role. And my partner and I, Charlotte, she's a psychologist and studying Hakomi now as well. And it's just that we get to bring this kind of modality and our years of experience together in relationship, but also as therapists, to men, women, couples, that sort of thing. It just feels good.
Beautiful.
Feels good.
Yeah. I highly encourage anyone who's listening in to check out Linzey. He does an incredible job, and I felt really guided and held, you know, as we're doing that one session. All right, we're going to be wrapping things up quite slowly. First of all, before I ask you my final question, where can our listeners find you? And as well, is there anything that you're offering that you would like to, bring to anyone listening in?
Yeah, Instagram's probably the easiest place, just Linzey B, Linzeyb. I would say just the work that I do is either one-on-one, and I have a program for men that guides them into this inner world that I speak of. And that's called the Embodied Man Mentorship. Just really simple, very broad, but very deep at the same time. And to me, it's probably a place that men can come to have these maps and learn about their inner world, such that afterwards they're more clear on what work they want to be doing, like what to be working on, you know, as a launch point for maybe more one-on-one work or just their own depth of research.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I love that. And I'll as well make sure to put everything in the show notes. All right, brother. This was epic. This was really good. I mean, there's so many different pieces that we touched on, and a lot of, I'm going to say, I trust that there's going to be a lot of valuable pieces for a lot of men that listened into, and as well the women that checked into this conversation. So yeah, just really wanting to acknowledge and appreciate you, just as well for the integrated, embodied wisdom that I can really sense and feel in you. This is not just informational. I can really sense that, you know, it's not something that you just learn from books, but it's actually like you are really operating from a place of like embodied experience. And I always admire and appreciate that. So thank you for coming on, Linzey. Brother, we touched on a lot in, in terms of like initiations, rites of passages, relationships, open relating, sexuality, emotions, navigating this internal world. I wonder if there's a final message here that you'd like to bring, let's say in a minute or less, of anything that we have maybe not touched on, that you would really like to speak, particular to the male listeners, and as well kind of the women and men who really want to thrive in the field of relationships. What would you say?
I would say that, there's just the guiding principles of just like loving presence for yourself, for others. And I think just my tagline that I use all the time, which is just knowing yourself is a worthy endeavor. Just be on that path, and just especially in relationship, because I feel like it takes two, and just both of you as individuals working on yourselves so you can be in relationship, I think is really important. So just knowing that as well, that would probably be it. But knowing yourself is a worthy endeavor.
Yeah, it's a good place to end things. Thanks for coming on, brother. For all the listeners who checked in, deeply appreciate you. In case there's any insights, any questions, any of your learnings that you would like to bring to both of us, I'll make sure as well to leave our contacts in the show notes. And until next time, signing off. Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.